Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Gedunk podcast. I'm Dan Barkoff here with my co-host Bobby Jones. And we got some stuff to talk about today. So Bobby, let's dive in.
So, unless you've been living under a rock, you've seen that the number one domestic thing that's been discussed here in the United States is the Supreme Court, in a rarity for the Supreme Court, ruled 9-0 that the young man that was mistakenly deported to El Salvador, who was here seeking proper and legal asylum, was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. El Salvador's president pays a visit to the White House, the president, and the Oval Office, and he says that he's not sending him back. And most importantly, President Trump says he's not asking for him back. Okay. Despite the Supreme Court saying you must facilitate bringing him back. And the legalese, people are debating what the word facilitate, that means. Bottom line, the Supreme Court said work to bring him back. The executive branch said, no, we're not going to. And they punted it to a foreign nation. Okay. Punted the interpretation of our laws, punted the intent of our Supreme Court to another, and let's be very blunt, dictator from another country. I have many thoughts on this, but Dan, what are your initial reads and reactions on this?
Well, the constitutional crisis is here, guys, right? So when we talk about that phrase, man, it's been thrown around an awful lot since Donald Trump came down the golden escalator. But the constitutional crisis, what we're saying when we refer to it is it's a conflict between branches of government, right? The founders set up our branches of government to provide for checks and balances. They should be three co-equal branches of government, neither one having inherent superiority. So if if the Congress were to start acting crazily, then they could be checked by the executive and SCOTUS and vice versa, right? And so now we've got a 9-0. I agree. It's shocking to me. I mean, even Sam Alito, right, who is a guy who is flying fascist flags in support of the rioters on January 6th outside his home, and Clarence Thomas, who the only word for Clarence Thomas is just consistent, perpetual bribery from Republican donors to fly around the world and take these luxury vacations and whatnot. These guys voted along with the rest of the Supreme Court that the U.S. government needed to bring this man back, and Trump flies up the dictator from El Salvador for an Oval Office meeting. The guy comes in next to President Bukele from El Salvador in the Oval Office, the same place where he's met with Zelensky, where he's met with the British Prime Minister, or he's met with the French Prime Minister, and treats him as really just as they're in on a joke together. That's how they treated this. They sat in the Oval Office. The the president of El Salvador said, "Hey, there's nothing I can do. I can't send this guy back to you." And Donald Trump, who is the leader of the most powerful nation in the world, said, "There's nothing I can do. It's up to El Salvador." So, they're both sort of chuckling about, "Hey, there's nothing we can do to send this guy back." One thing I did want to bring up, Bobby, and this is good news, and I saw this and I was like, thank fucking God, it's about time, hot off the presses. The Senator Van Hollen from Maryland just announced today that he is going to go down to El Salvador and check on Mr. Garcia down in El Salvador at this prison. And finally, it's like Congress has some oversight. They're taking their job of oversight seriously, at least one senator. And we're getting these sort of trickles of various parts of the legislative branch, doing their jobs. Cory Booker, Senator Van Hollen, people are starting to take this seriously. And while it hasn't really sort of been organized to this point, I do think it's admirable and a good sign that there are members of Congress who are like, well, I'm going to do what I was elected to do, and and provide oversight. So it's the constitutional crisis is here. I mean, does the Supreme Court, when Trump blows off what the Supreme Court has directed him to do, the arbiter is Congress, and so I mean, by my way of thinking, there must be some sort of avenue for referral from the Supreme Court to Congress that contempt essentially.
Right. Well, and so let's talk about how rare it is that the United States Supreme or SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, has given 9-0 judgments here in the last 15, 20 years. It's rare. It is so rare. So my antenna pick up when I hear 9-0 anything, right? Because obviously there is a gross miscalculation on execution of constitutional rights authorities across the board if they do that, which they have made it very clear that that happens. Why? Because due process is the most fundamental aspect of the United States Constitution, period. It's supposed to apply to everybody that is within the United States. That includes non-citizens. If you are a non-citizen that commits a crime in the United States, you still are subject to due process. Let's anchor there for a second. The current administration is arguing repeatedly that no, you're not. We can say that you are illegal and therefore there are no rights that apply to you. We can do whatever you want. No. That is fundamentally wrong in the United States. And to be completely honest, when you look at the United Nations human rights, that's not right. So internationally, it's a violation. Domestically within the United States, it's a violation. And they're doing this out of convenience, laziness, but most importantly, to calculate fear. And so as Congress is still scrambling to get its bearings, the Supreme Court obviously has understood if they do not speak as one voice on this whole Constitution thing falls apart. It falls apart. So, not to sit there and pat the Supreme Court on the back for doing their job. Okay, congratulations. It took you long enough. You did your job. That's only one out of the three branches that's got to get their shit together. Okay. The second one over here, the Congress, the United States Congress, like you said, flashes, bits and pieces. Constituents are letting their congressmen know in no uncertain terms. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. They are supposed to be the primary check to the president. They're supposed to be the executors of the check to the chief executive. Supreme Court tells you that it's wrong. Congress says Rogers up. They're like, hey, you're in contempt of Congress or impeachment. There are many things they can do. They have chosen to do nothing. Senator Holland, like I said, Senator Van Hollen going down to El Salvador is huge. However, that should be Marco Rubio's ass going down there. The Secretary of State, after the Supreme Court said what they said, he should personally be going down there and bringing him back. That is how it's supposed to work. Now, for all of you telling me and all of you who are going to be in our comments sitting there saying, well, he's not a citizen, he's not a citizen, he's not a citizen. This happened on United States sovereign soil. Okay?
And he had furthermore, he had a legal right to be here. But let's talk about citizens for a second, because Donald Trump, same meeting with the president of El Salvador, is saying there's this question of whether it was a hot mic or whether it was intentional, but he's essentially said, hey, the next one, you're going to have to build 5 more prisons because the homegrowns are coming next. And what he meant, he clarified, what he meant was, I am looking to deport United States citizens to El Salvador.
Yep.
And, his staff, of course, backpedaled and said, well, he did say that. We're exploring it. We're trying to figure out if it's legal. But of course, it would only be the most violent criminals. It would be people who've done these horrible, violent acts. And I think, my opinion is that is the red line of red lines, that
Bingo.
if you deport an American citizen to a foreign country, to a prison in a foreign country, which essentially is, even the Soviet Union didn't do that. We talk about
I
this
know.
as a gulag,
Yep.
but the Soviets didn't offshore their prisons.
Nope.
They,
They sent them to Siberia or another
right.
gulag location.
Okay. So, we have prisons in the United States of America that if you're a violent criminal, you could be. This is so far afield. This is a red line. Once we accept that an American citizen can be essentially exiled to a foreign prison, we're accepting that, it starts with somebody who maybe did commit horrible, violent crimes, and it's going to lead directly to political opponents
Right.
being sent to
Right.
the gulag.
Right.
that is not hyperbole. This is where we are.
The
We are
slope.
Yep.
The slope is so slippery, Dan.
We're not on a slippery slope, man.
It's-
We're on a fucking double black diamond with mogul.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a skiing reference for you,
Yeah.
Georgia boys.
Yeah,
So-
no, I know what it is. I went skiing once and never again. But yeah, no, you're right. They'll couch it and say we're getting our violent criminals out of the United States. Well, newsflash: there are criminals, limited to no due process.
Yep.
Okay, and then on top of that, you're telling me Stephen Miller won't come out a month later and sit there and say this person's rhetoric is violent.
Sure.
We're going to remove them from the United States. Despite the First Amendment and all of that, we deem that person a threat. No process, no due process, no warrants, no nothing. They just come, grab you, and fly you the hell out, and they're not going to come and get you back. And this is the test run. They're using non-citizens for that.
100%. They've already singled out two guys from the first administration, Chris Krebs and Miles Taylor, right?
Yep.
Who launched an investigation. They're doing it backwards, people. They're doing it. Usually a crime occurs and then people are like, let's investigate the crime. Donald Trump said, I want you to investigate these two people and find a crime. That's where we are. That is where, this is the double black diamond that we're on, and we're going to fall, and we're going to fall directly.
I'll bring it real quick, Dan. I don't want to lose this point. When you say directly fall, there was something that scared me yesterday when I was just thinking in my head about today. What if everything that we're saying with the military then feeds into this? Eventually you use military to conduct the raids to go get the people that you deem as threats. What do I mean by that? Look at all the pieces that are falling into place, people. Enemy Sedition Act, okay? The gutting of the Inspector Generals, the gutting of the JAG Corps from the military side. Every legal barrier that would stop the American military from seeking out its own citizens and capturing them being removed. At the same time, you create a place to hold people that is outside the jurisdiction of the United States. And then Trump tells you yesterday that, hey, whatever happens to him over there basically happens to him over there. Not our problem. Okay. You factor those two pieces, and now all of a sudden in the middle, you have a declaration of someone who's deemed to be a threat to the state. Period. No violent crime, no nothing. We're just going to come take you, grab you, and send you away. We're testing it now with the students on legal visas. Okay. And there's also the talk of how they have been looking into how to reversing citizenship, naturalized citizenship, this, that, and the other. All of these are happening in different lines of operations, we say in the military, simultaneously, with the goal being, if I don't like you, I can remove you from the United States. If I deem you as resistance to my regime, I can remove you from the United States. What we're seeing, you talk about 3D, 5D chess, different layers. happening simultaneously. And in each layer, there is a test case to see if the American people will tolerate it, which is why at the town halls that I referenced earlier, this question came up against Marjorie Taylor Greene, against Chuck Grassley, saying, due process. Why do you think you can do this without due process? Because there are other people out there like us that are thinking through this. They're seeing the tea leaves happen, and they're like, the ultimate objective is to remove people who will prove a resistance to what this administration wants to do, and they will do it illegally. And once those people are removed from the United States, we will never see them again.
100%.
That is the most autocratic thing I've ever heard from the United States point of view, I think, in my lifetime.
We are in, the analogy about the frog in the boiling pot of water?
Bingo.
Right? You throw, you get the frog, right? You throw the frog in the water, and if it's already boiling, the frog is like, hell no, I got to jump out. But if you just put the frog in the pot of water and then you turn it on low and it gradually heats up, it heats up, it heats up, that's us. We're in the pot of water and it's starting to get pretty damn warm, and we need to hold the people who can do something about this to account. We need to, if you live in any congressional district that is anything but just 100% red or 100% blue, you need to be calling your representative or your senator right now. You need to be doing these things. They need to feel the heat. This has to happen. My rep, Becca Ballant is, she's a nice Democratic rep. She's in her second term, and she's fine. And you know what? I want her to lead on this issue, and I'm going to put pressure on her as best I can. I'm going to start talking about primarying her in Vermont. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want her to do something about the fact that we have a dictator in the White House. Why are my reps not doing something about it? Bernie Sanders is my senator. Bernie, why have you not introduced, some sort of, where are you? You're traveling around the country. I want my reps to take action now. We are in the pot of water and it's heating up, and they're talking about deporting American citizens. And if you're in Congress, you need to get off your fucking ass.
Right. And here's what I will tell people who will say that we're flying off the handle, we're exaggerating. I literally can point to multiple historical references where this is exactly what happened. Everybody focuses on Germany and Austria and all this. Bruh, this has happened all over the world. It's happened in the last 15, 20 years. It's happened everywhere. But here's what I will say to them, very simply put. If you're tolerating this because you're in power, what happens when the day occurs when you're no longer in power? And the opposite does it. Okay. Do you want the extreme left to come in and sit there and say, hey, you didn't call this person by the right pronoun, you're gone to another country? I mean, these are fundamental truths of how our society was supposed to be structured. And I'm telling you, I know we've never reached the zenith of what our society could be, but damn it, I know this. We're looking at the trough of what it's going to be if we don't do something about this. The fact of the matter is Congress has 18 primary jobs laid out by the Constitution. And as of right now, they are in violation or completely overlooking about 7 of them on a consistent basis. The fact that the military is being used to go to the border and possibly going to have limited incursions into Mexico, because Trump wants to do that, and I've not seen anybody really fight back against that, is a problem. Because if they could do it to Mexico, then they'll do it in Texas. And then when they do it in Texas, all bets are off. Now you may be, seen as an enemy of the state, et cetera, et cetera. The other piece of this, too, is are we now a society where we selectively pick and choose what laws we're going to follow and which ones we're not? I thought the whole premise of the GOP was the law and order party, correct? They are violating so many laws, so many processes, that it's hard to keep a track of it, right? And when you bring it up, They're like, oh, don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah. Sort of like when they talked about tariffs and we're tariffing a goddamn island of pigeons. They're like, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. The lack of attention to detail and what they're picking to focus on should be a huge, huge red flag to people, because I don't have the luxury of following only certain laws and then and skipping other laws. You don't either, Dan. We
Yeah.
have to follow them all. But what they're doing, their administration, as the people who's supposed to safe hold all of this, they're saying, nah. The hell with that guy and his damn rights. Who cares? Who cares? Forget
Mhm.
the fact that there was someone literally in their citizenship interview that they yank out and deport. Why?
You know,
You know,
it's really, I can't believe that we're here as a country. I mean, I really can't. He was elected. We're rounding up. There was a case 2 days ago now, I guess, in Vermont where there was a man of Palestinian descent. He was a grad student, taking classes online at Columbia down in New York City. He'd been fairly outspoken. I don't agree with necessarily his verbal support for certain aspects of the of what's going on in Gaza. And he was just scooped off the street the other day. So they told him to come in for a citizenship interview,
yep.
and cops in hoods and masks covering their faces uh arrested him and threw him in the back of an unmarked vehicle, and they don't know they took him. His lawyers don't know where he went. This is happening. I mean, it's happening in my neighborhood. It's happening in the
Jesus.
town next to me. They're essentially they're doing renditions on American soil of people who are here legally. This was a green card holder. Yes, he's not an American citizen. But when did we say it was okay to just have a internal Gestapo that just in masks, right?
Right.
These cops are fucking cowards, right? Or I don't even know if they're cops. I mean, they
We don't
might
know who they are, Dan.
Right, they might be Homeland Security, whatever, border, ICE. I don't know. Nobody knows. They're just dudes who they could have literally been a local, the Michigan militia or something. They're people who showed up, handcuffed a man, and threw him in the back of an unmarked car. And no one knows where he went. I mean, this is happening in America. It happened 2 days ago in my community.
Uh,
Um,
let me
so
ask you. Let me ask you this. Can I ask you this question, Dan?
yeah.
How is your community? How is your neck of the woods responding to this type of stuff? I know down here in Georgia, it's been surprisingly loud because we're traditionally red but more purple.
Sure.
People have been vocal as hell about this stuff down here. They're like, "Wait, what?
Yeah.
How's Vermont? The complete opposite of where I'm at. What are they thinking?"
So I mean, Vermont's an interesting place, right? Like obviously Vermont's real blue,
Yeah,
but it's blue, just like other places. It's bluest in sort of the areas with the highest density population in the Burlington area, and Chittenden County is what we call it. A couple other sort of islands of really deep blue, and then when you get out in sort of the country, we call it the Northeast Kingdom, or in the Green Mountains, it's surprisingly red. Like Trump carried parts of the state pretty handily. Very unpopulated parts of the state, but he did win the rural areas. um this There's call for, so when this arrest of this gentleman happened 2 days ago, he had called his state senator and sort of tipped her off. He was like, "Hey, ICE has told me to come in for a citizenship review, and I think I might be arrested. Can you be there?" And so his state senator was actually there and witnessed it and took video and handed it to the press. And um there's a movement here. The first thing, they've been holding some of these folks in Vermont detention facilities, and so there's pressure on the governor right now, who is a Republican, from the state legislature to rescind like the memorandum of understanding where, we would we would allow the feds to basically house detainees in Vermont holding facilities. And so I think that certainly the short answer is people are very, very uncomfortable with it. I don't think there's been as much. It happened so recently. I don't think there's been time really for, mass organizational protests and things like that. Um, it's, I also view it personally, I view it as a little bit of a thumb in the eye or a fuck you from the Trump administration that, hey, we're going to do this in Vermont. You can't stop us, right? Like I'm POTUS. And if I want to, you guys embarrassed JD Vance when he came up here to go skiing. And now we're going to hold these guys in your city, in your state. And we're going to kidnap them off of your streets. Fuck you. You can't do anything about it. That's, that's sort of like, my take on it. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about these. So what happened in Georgia at Margin?
Real quick, I'm going to comment real quick on that. I think you're right. I think a lot of this has to do. Don't get it twisted. The public persona, the public messaging of how they're doing these things matters just as much as what they're doing.
Sure.
To them. They want to be seen as the strong guy. They want to strong arm people, and intimidation is part of that equation. So along those lines, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the representative of Georgia's, I want to say 13th district in the state of Georgia, which is one district over from me, she had her town hall in Cobb County. Cobb County, for those that don't know, is part of Metro Atlanta. It's probably the section of her district, not probably it is, that will be the most resistant to a lot of the things that she does. And boy, oh boy, that town hall was something else. 2 people got tased, multiple people got drugged out. It was unreal.
Tell me about so what's up with Marge's district, man? So
Marjorie's district is unique.
Yeah, and so I have a very layperson understanding. I'm not a Georgian, but my impression is it fair to say it was a district that at one point historically tried to eliminate all African Americans from the district? Is that?
Yes, historically, there are counties that did exactly that. They literally tried to run African Americans out of their rightful homes. And if you look at a map of Georgia, it's basically the northwest corner of Georgia that goes into the Metro Atlanta area. Traditionally very red, traditionally, being blunt and honest, especially pre-civil rights, Jim Crow, very racist. There were places where lynchings and all those type of things happened. And, has it gotten better? Yes. Is it where it probably should be? Absolutely not. And that's not to befell my fellow Georgians, but hell, we all got things we can improve on. They just have a long list of them. Now, her being the representative there, when those districts were drawn and it goes into Metro Atlanta, Cobb County is much like Atlanta. It's got blue, but it's multicultural, this, that, and the other. So she had her town hall there, right?
Okay.
Now, interesting to see how she did it. She took questions that were already sent in, right? She did not take questions live. She did not interact with the person asking the question live. There was no dialogue. It was her reading and responding. Meaning, number one, they cherry-picked the questions they wanted. Number two, she could prepare her answers in advance, not having to think on the fly, because heaven help, we have, representatives that can actually form cognitive thoughts on the fly. And number three, most importantly, the person that asked the initial question cannot ask follow-ups or sit there and say they are satisfied with the answer. So that's how she controlled the environment. So what would happen is she would read the question, and the people who were there live would then yell like, no, da-da-da-da, blah, blah, blah. And it got dicey, right? One lady yelled at her as she was answering the question. And these are legitimate questions about due process, about Doge, like who the hell has the authority to do what Doge is doing, and why aren't you saying something about it? Right. Other questions were about.
What'd she say about that? I'm curious. Like what?
vehemently backs Doge and what they're doing. She did not address the legality of having these non-elected officials be able to do that, or the fact that Doge had never been authorized by Congress. And see, this is the part of the authoritarian playbook that people need to understand. The Gestapo in Germany was just put together by Hitler. It wasn't something that was passed legally. It wasn't vetted by the people. It was like, we're creating a secret police. We're doing this because this is what I want to do. Right? And then was given unfettered access to all aspects of government. Doge, no one knew it was even coming during the election. There was no mention of Doge during this election. There was mention about, hey, we're going to make government more efficient. We're going to audit, blah, blah. But there was no mention of Elon Musk, the world's richest man, is going to head a task force and say, we're going to flood everything and we're going to get access to your tax records, your medical records, everything we can get our hands on and create this out of nowhere. So there are people who have voted Republican that are in the state of Georgia that are rightfully pissed because they had no say-so in that. She defends it. And I'm thinking to myself, if Barack Obama did that, you would be leading the torch brigade to the White House. There's no way. She was all about all this, the conspiracy theories that she's touted, this, that, and the other, all has to do with the hiding and access of government, right? She's doing the opposite right now. And the fact that the police were dragging person after person, different backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, blah, blah, didn't matter. And here's the thing that blew my mind the most, the condescending tone of which she addressed people that did not agree with her, which is something she always does. But to do it there in person tells me this is not about representing her constituency from the Georgia Congressional District of 13, 14. It's about her kissing up to power and being seen as indispensable by the person in power. She doesn't govern. She's barely put forth any bills. All she does is go to and fro saying things to stir the pot on behalf of Donald Trump.
No, she's a performer, right? Like,
yes.
She's not.
Yes.
So there's legislators who actually pass legislation, guys like Henry Waxman historically, who
Right.
you don't really know their name and they're not just chasing the cameras. And then there's people who are both sides have it, right? There are people who just love the camera and they
Right.
want to shock and awe and get on do their news hit. And, the Congress has done nothing. There's been no legislation passed. Trump's just doing it without Congress. And Congress is just abdicating. I don't necessarily blame Trump even for this, right? Like, Trump is going to Trump, and Congress is just, sitting on their hands and, oh, there's nothing we can do. It's a real failure of our system to anticipate how powerful political parties have become and demagogues have become. It's really what Alexander Hamilton and James Madison were worried about, and it's come full fruition.
I think when we look at this in the context of history, because I've stopped and I've tried to think, when else have we seen this in American history? Don't get me wrong. We've seen powerful presidents. We've seen powerful Congresses. We've seen powerful Supreme Courts. All three have had their time to be the lead dog in this check and balance, system that we have, right?
Yeah.
But never have I ever seen, and I'm dying to ask historians that know this and, chime in on the comments if you know, when have we seen one part of that triangle completely say the hell with our job, and the other part of the triangle basically, in no uncertain terms, all of a sudden be the one thing that's stopping everything, because the people that are saying the hell with our jobs are also working in cahoots with the other branch. So, for example, Congress is not checking the president. Congress is amplifying the president in a way where it challenges the norms and it challenges the limits of the Constitution. I don't think we've seen that before in American history. We have seen, Congresses that are presidents that are presidential party, same party, and they pass agendas. But I don't think we've ever seen Congress work with the president to sit there and burn the Constitution in the way that we're seeing this. I may be wrong, but I can't think of a time in American history where that's happened.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think what's different and what's unique is the checks and balances were intended to pit the different branches against one another,
Right?
right? And so when you have a Congress who is like, no, no, we're okay with this, then the checks and balances no
It
longer
falls
work,
apart.
right? Because then you've got
Yeah,
2 out of 3. And so um, one branch behaving badly is fine if the other 2 gang up on it, right?
exactly.
But we can't do that right now because of the
Exactly.
yeah.
I, I mean, there have been times in American history where Congress and the president will pass a law and it gets in front of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will say that's unconstitutional. The law does not go through. And
Yeah.
then what Congress will do is they'll go and come up with a law that they know is more constitutional and do it again. Perfect. Fine. That's how the system's supposed to work. Here we have in this case right here that we've been talking about, you have laws that were on the books that, by the way, have been in use basically since post-World War II. Political asylum, because the Cold War and everything, we created apparatuses for people to come to the United States that want to be Americans, that come from oppressive nations, usually from the Soviet bloc influence, and become Americans, and then they come into our society and they help amplify our society. That's why we had these things. Okay. It's how we got to the moon. Literally, we took Nazis from Germany. They pledged a loyalty oath to us and we set them up to create bigger V2 rockets, and it got us to the moon in the Cold War.
Well, I mean, our asylum laws are rooted in our failures
That's also true.
with the Holocaust, right? I
It's
mean,
also true.
I forget the name of the ship, but there was the ship with the Jewish refugees from Germany that sort of floated around the world trying to find a place.
Find a place to dock.
Yeah, and they ended up going back to Europe, and many of them then perished in the Holocaust subsequently. So that's sort of where our system of asylum comes from, and certainly it has been. Certainly it needs to be reformed, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
there's a way to reform it, and that's through legislation from Congress, right? It's not, you can't just arbitrarily decide you're going to render people to third world prisons. Which, by the way, these guys are not even from El Salvador, all the people that.
No. That's the thing. They're not going back to their home countries, Dan.
Right.
Which is typically what you do if you're not granting them asylum. You send them back to the home country. We're not doing that. And I think you hit on a very, very important point about how the asylum seekers, we had to learn the hard way that we needed to have a system. We watched people die because we were not set up to deal with this. And so when you apply it now, Afghanistan, right?
Sure.
Freaking Vietnam during that time, Cuba. These are asylum seekers that, for lack of a better way to describe it, are asylum seekers because they came from societies that were jacked up and the United States intervened some way, somehow. So a lot of it is on us, right? No one talks about, Iran-Contra affair and all that kind of stuff of what Central America in the 80s did to Central America.
Sure.
Nicaragua, all that. We just conveniently forget all of that. And you look at this destabilization that's happening now in the same area of the world. Let's not talk about that. But you have a fucked up system of government in many countries there. And there's a reason that the cartels have taken over and people want asylum. Okay. So if we are supposed to be everything that we say we are, USA, 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 and you have people that come legally, they do the proper paperwork, they stay out of trouble like this guy has done, establish a life, a family, a kid, all of this. And then when we just feel like it and I'm going to say it, because they're brown and may not speak the English language to the king standards, we just deport them. It's ridiculous. It's hypocritical. But most importantly, You are supposed to be a nation of laws. We set up laws. They followed it. You can sit there and say they were here illegally. The second that the process for asylum happened, that goes away. They're in the system, which is why we knew that the guy was being deported in the first place, right? And now we're just reneging on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the morally, it's unquestionably
Right.
disgusting. Legally, it's also seems pretty illegal.
I mean, the
That
Supreme Court just said it.
right. Yes, it's illegal. So um we're in the pot of water, guys, and the temperature is getting hotter. I mean, I worry about our Afghan refugees. I worry about going back even further, the Iraqi refugees, the Bosnian refugees. I mean, we have all these sort of this diaspora of folks from various conflicts who've come to the U.S. to make a life. And I mean, here in Vermont, we've got um, a sizable contingent of men from Afghanistan who were part of KPF, which was the Coast Protection Force. KPF was they were a CIA unit, essentially. They were run by the CIA paramilitary. They're one of the oldest, they might have been the oldest kind of paramilitary organization. So for 20 years, they were doing the work of defending our country by doing these raids and these dangerous missions both internally in Afghanistan and occasionally in Pakistan, and killing and capturing members of the Taliban, the Hekmatyar network, the Al Qaeda, and they're here now, and
Yep.
they're in my community.
Yep.
And Donald Trump just eliminated the special visa status for Afghans this week, and
Whoa. Pause. Are you serious?
so Trump, let me look it up real quick because I don't want to misspeak.
Well,
Afghan.
while you're looking that up, I mean, Cuba temporary status about to get revoked. That's 50,000 Cubans, specifically in South Florida. We're talking about people that put their trust in the United States government when they didn't have to, in a lot of respects. They chose us over where they were coming from. And if we literally pull the rug from under them, we have lost all international credibility. So you're talking about the Afghanistan contingent, and that's a lot of people that put it on the line for us post 9/11. What if the Taliban calls the White House tomorrow and be like, hey, we want to take all those people back, want to prosecute them?
Yeah, so Trump just on the 11th, so earlier this week,
Yep.
ends temporary protected status for thousands of Afghans. So, the Afghan community, many of them came over under kind of different programs because obviously it happened very quickly. And so
Right.
many of them are on special immigrant visas, and some of them are under what's called this temporary protected status, which basically is a government protection for people from war zones or places with horrible natural disasters and stuff like that, and it allows them to work here. It allows them supposedly it shields them from deportation, and they're
Right.
allowed to work and get a W-2 and have a job and try to earn a living here. And so that's now gone for however many Afghans, as of earlier this week. He yanked the rug out from under them, so they're now subject to being deported. Yeah, it's saying 9,000 people were covered, 9,000 Afghan refugees covered by TPO. So,
So let me make sure to recap all this as we wind down here.
yep,
The people that helped us, helped you, Dan, helped all of us around the world post 9/11. Their protective status has been revoked. Those that got caught in the Cuban Revolution, their protective status being revoked. As a matter of fact, if you basically aided the United States of America in the last 50 years, there's a chance that your protective status for you and your family could be revoked and you could be subject to deportation. So people, This is why we're bringing and raising the red flag here and now. You have people that chose to help the United States because they believed in us and everything we stood for at very dire times being removed. You have students being removed. There's going to be a reverse brain drain because of this. But most importantly, the president of the United States told the dictator of El Salvador to build more prisons. And I'm going to send homegrown
for the
people
homegrowns.
there.
That's yep. So, that's I mean, sure. They're gonna
Now,
find an American citizen who is a quadruple homicide guy and whatever, and people are gonna like, well, he's a bad person and he's gonna go down there. And then they're gonna have somebody who, was a member of the Bloods and he's gonna go
yep,
down there. And then they're gonna send somebody down there who was tax evasion, and then
yep,
it's gonna be political prisoners. This is
yep.
what is happening right now in our country.
Real time. So people, we're not trying to just say this to say this. Dan and I have been in countries where this exact thing has happened, right? And it's been accepted, as normal. And the thing that was supposed to be different about our country, this experiment of 248 years, was we're supposed to be different. John Adams defended the British troops that created the Boston Massacre.
Sure.
From day one, we were about due process because he said they were entitled to a proper due process before we were even a country. And he caught hell for it. But the principle of due process, the principle of American citizenship and what that means, the principle of if you were on the United States soil, sovereign soil, there are certain rights and processes that we do not compromise. We do not compromise.
At least Stalin had like his show trials, right? We're not even doing that.
Yes.
We're just throwing them in the back of the plane, right? Like,
yes. And
there's
kept them in country, kept them all in country.
Yep. So it's crazy times here, folks. Bobby, I think after that, we need to unwind a little bit. What's on your sports horizon, man?
Well, the NFL draft is coming, people. It's coming. It's next week. Because I'm a season ticket holder for my Atlanta Falcons, I will be attending. They better draft a defensive end that can rush the passer. I hope they draft someone from the University of Georgia, either Javon Walker or Michael Williams, the two defensive ends. University of Georgia, their defense won a Super Bowl last year, basically. But the Atlanta Falcons should do what?
Is Shedeur Stevens
Shedeur Sanders?
Sorry, Sanders. I'm sorry. What I say, Stevens. Yeah, Shedeur Sanders. Is he a starting NFL quarterback?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
And here's the thing. I know the people debated that, and they've gotten on him for basically being Deion's son and having that Deion attitude. In the NFL, you're only as good as your confidence level. Everybody there is an athlete. You need someone that's built for it. And if he goes to New York, for example, I think he'll thrive in New York because he can handle the bright lights of New York. I think the NFL draft, out of all the sporting events that happen all over the world, is the most fascinating thing because it's a study in psychological evaluation. You have all these super uber talented people physically, but at the same time, you don't know how their mind is going to react to the pressure of being in the National Football League. That's any draft. However, with the NFL, the fact that you have to fit into a team more so than any other sport because there are 11 dudes on the field, right? And a lot of them will do things you will not notice on the field. But if they don't do it well, you cannot be successful. That's fascinating to me. It's fascinating to me. In soccer, you have 11 people on the field, but one dude can take over a game, blah, blah, blah. The right offensive guard is not going to take over the game in the NFL. But if he does not do his job, the quarterback gets killed, you have no shot, right? So your value is not based on visibility. Your value is based on how effective you are when no one's looking. That's why I love football, right? It's the ultimate team sport. And looking at it, all the money that's being guaranteed, and we already kind of talked about how college football is being ruined. The NFL, though, is the last final frontier of team and psychological evaluation of the individual. Does the individual makeup of a person work in a team environment And does it work in certain teams' environments than others? That's what they have to figure out. And general managers who figure this out are not psychologists. That's what's
Yeah.
fascinating. If I was
Yeah.
a general manager, I'd have a psychologist at my side at all times making my decisions. But they
Do
don't.
you, so the NFL draft, I mean, the NBA draft too, but the NFL draft seems to me, uh, maybe the most sort of hopeful time in sports for like a pro team, right? I mean,
Yep.
the NBA draft is fun too. I remember when Zion Williamson got drafted and it was huge and like New
Yep.
Orleans was, super happy, but I feel like the NFL draft really, I mean, they made hiring an entry level employee like a thing and we love it. Right?
That's a very good way of putting it.
Right?
I
Like
mean, look at it this
you
way.
get
Look at
excited
it this
about
way.
these guys. Yeah.
The NFL is the only league in my mind where going into it, everybody feels like they have a shot to win the championship. And that's because of the salary cap and how everybody has an equal playing field, an equal pot of money. And it's also the only league, and I don't know what that says about Americans, where we automatically assume best case scenario for our individual team. It's like rational thought goes out the window and you get high on hopium, right? And you're just like, yeah, man, this guy's going to work out. This guy's not going to get injured. That guy's going to be in the office first and he's going to be the last to leave practice. You think all of these positive things, not realizing these are human beings, a lot of them who have jumped to levels of socioeconomic status they never could have dreamt of before. And in that situation, it just amplifies who they are. And in a lot of respects, it's the same thing when you elect someone president of the United States. Donald Trump's the same guy he was in the 90s. It's
Yeah.
just amplified because he's president. So Shedeur Sanders is the same kid he was in high school. It's just going to be amplified because now he's in the NFL, right? How do you as an owner deal with that, right?
Yeah. Do you have a sense in football of I do you remember the 30 for 30 about like Andre Rison and all the dudes who like, blew their millions of dollars or whatever?
Broke. It's called broke.
Yeah.
I remember
Is that what
that.
it's called? Yeah. So I mean the these guys, these kids, when I was 22, so I'm going to little wayback machine here.
Yeah.
We got this loan when we were at the Naval Academy, or at least I took it, right? So what they call it, your career starter loan. So you could take out this loan at like a low interest rate. I don't remember what it was. Let's say it was 2% or something like that. It was, it was like you could take this loan for maybe it was 20 grand or something. And then when you graduated, you're an ensign. The idea is you have enough money to buy a car and that sort of stuff. And like, do your job, which is to live off base and drive to your ship every day or the airfield or whatever it is. And so there were, even with that relatively paltry amount of money, which felt like, I felt like a millionaire when we got it. And there were, we got it right at the time of like the dot-com boom.
Yep.
And I remember like a bunch of us sort of invested money in all these .com, like Microsoft or whatever, and everyone lost money, and it all like went away. And there were some people who just bought like a sports car and then used the money to go like just drink and party. And like those guys got more money. They got more out of their
more
money.
Value. Yeah.
I
remember.
I invested in it. Yeah, man, it was having money when you're a kid, really, your brain's not even done developing is an interesting thing. But I can't even imagine. You hear about these guys who did it right, like Gronk, Gronkowski, who just, if he's not a moron, he sure plays one on TV. And like he, by sort of all published accounts, did really well with his money. He was like, hey, I only, my entire salary goes into my investment fund, and I live off of what I get from endorsement deals, stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing to
you would be I think you'd be surprised. I think people would be very surprised to see who has the right people around them and are able to make those type of decisions where it's
Yeah,
long term. Like Gronk immediately had that surrounding, and you got to give him a lot of credit on that. I think Gronk is one of those guys that plays sort of a role. He's much smarter than, I mean, you can't be basically the greatest tight end to play the game and not be smart, not in Bill Belichick's system, at least, right? So I think he's a great example of that. But I think what the NFL draft shows, and the beauty of the NFL, these kids come from all over the country. Heck, now all over the world, you got kids that are getting drafted that grew up in other countries, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah,
But I think what it shows is no matter the upbringing, the background and stuff like that, you can meet an elite level. But it also shows that that elite level is phase one, right? You got to start all over again. The difference is now you're all on equal playing fields, right? Whatever motivation got you out of the hood or got you off the farm and this, that, and the other, that's great. That's fine. That's fine. Welcome to the most scrutiny you'll ever see in your life. How are you
sure.
going to respond to it? You look at NFL quarterbacks. I saw some article about a year ago. Over half of them see a sports psychologist on a regular basis
Yeah,
because it's the most pressure-packed position in sports. And I stand by that. I'll down that hill. There's no other sport that can compare to being a quarterback in the National Football League, right? How do they process it? The golfers. You saw Rory McIlroy
yep,
uh, just win the Masters, completing his career Grand Slam. That man went through psychological hell the last decade trying to win the Masters, right? Which is why you saw the emotion of his win. And this is coming from someone who's been to the Masters. It's golf Valhalla. I know why it weighs on him. That to win there is different than any other place. He just let it all out, right?
yeah,
He let it all out because the stress that he was, I mean, he had gone through trials and tribulations with his marriage, all this stuff. He'd already been divorced once. It weighs on you, right? And so the draft is where you can take one moment and congratulate yourself for doing something that most human beings will never be able to do.
sure.
But how do you handle the success? Rory won 3 majors back to back to back, and it took him 11 years to win the last one to complete this thing. Only 6
Yep,
golfers have done it. You are a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders. You have grown up in the presence of greatness. Your father's the greatest to ever do something in his sport, and you have responded. That's great. You'll get drafted. Now what? Are you prepared to handle it? This is something that people, especially young men, in my humble opinion, do not ask themselves. Am I really ready to be successful? Am I really going to rest on my laurels? What's going to motivate me to be greater in the future? And that's why the NFL is unbelievable, because they'll do the whole thing. 10 years from now, they'll look back at this draft and see where are they now? What did they do? How did they
right.
perform?
Yeah,
And it's fascinating to see the guy that was drafted like in the second to last round is a future Hall of Famer. And
sure.
the guy that was drafted number 1 and number 2 in the entire draft never panned out.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure, man. Well, I think that's a good place to end. Thanks for listening, guys. And kind of a heavy discussion today, but there's real stuff happening in our country. So please
Yep.
pay attention. Please call your reps, call your senators, send them emails, send them letters. Um, we're on the double black diamond, and it's
Yep.
real slippery. So thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks, everyone.